It's a really interesting relationship to see because everything that's going on between them is clearly understood between them, but never explicitly stated. They know they could make each other happier. They know that there's something deeper going on here. They know that their partners are a hot ass mess. They know they really don't want the marriages that they're in, or they would want their partners. Not that they don't, that Barb doesn't love Bill, but she doesn't love polygamy. Not that Joey doesn't love Wanda, but he doesn't love the burden of her mental illness.
Hello, everyone. This is Alex.
And this is Em.
Welcome to the latest episode of The Good, the Bad, the Basic.
This is a podcast for nostalgic Gen X and millennials and binge watchers of all ages.
On this podcast, we'll be discussing what we love, what we hate, and what was just a bit problematic about the TV and movies that we're addicted to, and do a bit of rewriting where necessary.
For much more exclusive content, become a show producer on Patreon and get access to after the episode bonuses, curated playlists, movie reviews, season finale episodes, and pilot episode reviews, and much, much more. Join the GBB family at patreon.com/goodbadbasic.
On today's episode, we'll be diving into the tales of the Henrickson family, the stars of the HBO family drama Big Love.
Lasting 5 seasons on any network is nothing to sneeze at, but doing it at HBO is definitely indicative of a quality series, and Big Love was absolutely that.
Big Love is a series about polygamist Bill Henrickson and his 3 wives. The show's premise is exciting enough, but a premise can only hold an audience's attention for so long.
What was it about Big Love that kept us coming back for more? And what makes it continue to stand out among other family dramas to this day?
Stay tuned.
All right, you guys, here's some critical information about Big Love. As we said, it is a family drama, created by Mark V. Olson and William Sheffer. It aired from March 12th, 2006 to March 20th, 2011. It lasted 5 seasons and 53 episodes. It stars Bill Paxton as Bill Henrickson, Jean Triplehorn as Barb Henrickson, his first wife, Chloe Sevigny as Nicolette Grant, his second wife, and Jennifer Goodwin as Margene Heffman, his third wife. The show is really great because it is about Bill, his 3 wives, but in a broader context, it's about his children, his extended family back on the polygamous compound where he was raised, and how their principles and the way that they practice their religion affect the immediate family, the extended family, and their lives outside of the family. So it's a really great show. Let's jump right into season 1. Alex, take it away.
Right. So this show, it was really, really, really great to watch this show. Again, I'd seen it before, but just in the rewatch, this is an excellent series. I don't think I'll be able to say that enough. Like, it's really, truly impeccably written. Something about Big Love is that Big Love was definitely one of several shows that sort of helped usher us into what I think people now refer as the golden age of television, just because of how, like we said, how different the story is, how just impeccable, how like pitch perfect the writing is, how well developed these characters are. And Big Love was as a cultural artifact was a juggernaut, because you have, around the time you have that's happening, you do have the big sort of, you have this Warren Jeffs the real life, like, yeah, Warren Jeffs and like that polygamous cult. It's in the news cycle pretty much every day. And the year Big Love premieres, the first episode premieres, is the same year that they finally capture Warren Jeffs. And he's like, he's captured and put into prison and like sort of awaiting trial. And then by the time before the series ends, like a year before the series ends, you'll have the premiere of the reality TV show Sister Wives, which will be a huge hit for TLC. Huge hit in their reality programming, and spawn off a bunch of spinoff reality shows from Sister Wives. And Sister Wives is still airing. It's in its 10th season. And it's still a show people check in on. So this was just, Big Love had like just this huge cultural impact. Also, it's, once we start really, really getting into the show, I think it's so fascinating how Roman, the actor who plays Roman, really does look like Warren Jeffs. And then Chloe Sevigny has like a very striking resemblance to Warren Jeffs' real life daughter, Rachel. So that's fascinating. But yeah, season one is great. I love season one. Season one, that pilot is actually really a perfect pilot. We're introduced to all of our people that will probably follow throughout the course of the series, with maybe just a few side characters coming in. We are set up to learn about this. We're set up in a really great way to learn about this family, the Henrickson family, and we see Bill sort of with his three wives, really just trying to make it and trying to live a social life, but also not have the secret revealed.
Right. So Bill Henrickson and his wives are polygamous. Obviously, polygamy is illegal in the United States. There are countries in the world where polygamy is illegal, or certain states within countries, but this is not one of them. We meet the three wives, Barb, Nikki, and Margene. We learn that even though they're polygamous, they don't live on a polygamous commune or a polygamous compound. They're living in a mainstream suburb, and they're trying their best to make it mainstream. In the pilot, we learn about the wives, the order of the wives, and we learn that they live in three houses side by side, which share a backyard where the fences can go up or down. And he tells anyone who asks that he is a landlord and he is just renting to Nikki and Margene, his second and third wives, and that they are single mothers. That's a story that they keep up. Since Barb is his first wife, she is the only wife that he can really claim in public, and we see how this dynamic ripples throughout the series of having this public wife and this public life that is at odds with their private life. So Big Love is really great too, because we are also introduced to the auxiliary characters of Bill and Barb's eldest children, Sarah and Ben, and how the polygamous lifestyle is affecting them. Sarah is strongly opposed to it, while Ben wants to lean in, and he very much wants the life that his father has. We're also set up for conflicts that won't be resolved until later seasons, right in this first season. In this first season, for instance, we see that Ben, Bill's son, has feelings for his second wife, Margene, and they take this at a snail's pace, but this situation unfolds in a manner that feels very organic and comes to a head finally in season 4, which we'll be talking about on our next episode. But the way that they deal with the wives, their personal feelings about polygamy, their feelings about the other wives, and their feelings about Bill, I think is really well done. Barbara is from a traditional LDS family. So she was not born or raised in polygamy, even though she was born and raised as a Mormon. The second wife, Nikki, was raised on a fundamentalist LDS polygamous compound called Juniper Creek, which was the same place Bill was raised. So she has very different feelings about the relationship. And the third wife, Margene, was raised Catholic and only met Bill back when she was an employee of his, first at one of his Home Plus stores, which is like a fictionalized competitor of a Home Depot, and then later on as a family babysitter. So they come from three very, very different worlds, and they're trying to make this big blended family work for the sake of their husband. So it's a really well-written show, like Alex says.
Right. It's just so masterful. Like, it really is masterful, particularly in what you were saying, in that you're right. There are so many plots that are introduced into this first season that don't get completely resolved until, like this show has like 5 seasons. It doesn't get resolved till season 4 or like mid season 5, which I mean is really just, it's so phenomenal. Which I mean, at least, I guess, to be fair, and I'm not taking away from the writing, because the writing is so impeccable. But to be fair, like, there is only, I think, 12 episodes in each season, which helps, right? They don't have to fulfill this sort of 22 episode order every season. They're just, which is what like a network show would have to do, which is, I can see, can be significantly harder. But the show is wonderful, particularly in that even as you transition from season to season, I never feel like there's a huge shift or like there's a huge upset in the tone or like who these characters are. I definitely just observe like it's like a deepening. Right? Does that make sense?
No, I completely agree with that. What I was going to say was that watching the show was actually really refreshing to me because of how short the seasons are. So the seasons we're going to be talking about on this episode are seasons 1 and 2, which are 12 episodes each. It's amazing to me looking back at how much quality they packed into every single episode without ever making the audience feel overwhelmed with material. I look at shows that we have previously reviewed, like The Vampire Diaries, like the originals, and they have 22 episodes, which, arguably should be harder, but what are you really giving me? We have ideas or concepts that are introduced in one episode and completely forgotten about by the next. We have one season being treated as if it's 5 seasons and just crammed with mostly unnecessary subplots. And I'm just like, what is even happening? Like, I almost think that this is a testament to writers. Like, in creative writing classes, they often use writing a short story as a writing exercise, because having a limited word count actually forces you to streamline your ideals. And I really think it shows on a show like Big Love. They had to have a very clear vision of what they were going to do because they didn't have a lot of time to do it in.
Right. It's really great in that, like, I don't ever watch an episode of Big Love and feel like there's never an episode that I watch that I feel like it's a filler episode. I feel like I'm always learning pertinent information in each episode.
I so agree.
Right. So season 1, let's jump into some of these plots. So let's kick it off with, let's talk about this sort of like affair within the marriage plot between Bill and Barb that kind of happens.
Oh, yes. This was actually one of my favorite episodes. So as we've mentioned, Barb is Bill's first wife, and she was his only wife for the first 12 years of their marriage. She went into a monogamous marriage that became a polygamous marriage after over 10 years. This is significant, right? You think you're in one relationship and then you find yourself in a very different one. So the wives assign nights every wife is assigned a night with the husband, Bill. And after going off to a party over the weekend together, Bill and Barb embark on a full-blown affair. Can't keep their hands off each other. He's getting hotel rooms. They're seeing each other every night. It's made clear that Margine never knows about the affair, but Nikki becomes suspicious and she realizes they're sleeping together. During the course of this affair, I think this is one of the stronger highlights of Barb's conflicting feelings about their life. I always get the feeling with Barb that she's someone who's never really sure that she's made the right decision in engaging in polygamy. And we really see this conflict and this inner turmoil during this affair. Because not only does she want it very badly, unlike Bill, she seems to be the only one who feels guilty for basically cheating on their other wives.
Right. And it's so... First of all, yeah, she seems guilty and she's always questioning and something that when that affair plot starts, something that even struck me about it is that it sort of feels like she or they're like rediscovering each other, like they're looking at each other for the first time, like really looking at each other for the first time in a long time, right? Which we know happens in like regular marriages, right? Like you marry someone, you're with them, you're very comfortable and you lose sight of each other. And that's part of what makes the story like a bit tragic in a way. 'Cause it's like, it's like they would have eventually, because the reason why we find out over the course of season 1, the reason why this sort of plural marriage thing ends up happening is because Barb gets cancer and she gets very, very sick, and Bill gets Nikki to come and take care of her, and then Nikki joins the family, and then soon after Marge, and so when this affair plot happens, it feels like maybe they didn't need all of that to begin with. Like it could have just been them, and it could have just been. It would have worked out, or like it would have been fine. But there is like there's a tragedy to it, and it's just a really fascinating plot in the first season.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of my points of contention with Bill Henrickson and the way that polygamy is presented on this show, and probably the way that it works, in real life, to be honest, is that it very much seems as if, once I get a wife and we get settled and we have some babies, the moment there's a lull, marriages go through peaks and valleys. There are going to be times when you're just in a very comfortable companionship, and there's going to be times when you're hot and heavy for each other. You cannot sustain a burning passion every single day of your married lives. And it definitely seemed as if, collecting wives was just a matter of who's stoking my fire right now. Or who do I need in my life? Who's of service to my life right now? The reason why the issue of how the polygamy started really bothers me is, as Alex said, when Barb was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was season 1 premieres 6 years after Barb's cancer, and the way it happened is he brings Nikki, who again was raised on that same Juniper Creek compound that he was, to nurse her. I mean, of all the people you could have brought to nurse her, I think this whole thing just feels super manipulative on Bill's part. Like basically, he took advantage of his wife's illness to groom her into being accepting of polygamy.
Right. And to the show's credit, it'll be something that they both finally verbalize in season 2, right? Which we'll get to, but so we'll get back to this, but yeah, and then also Bill himself cannot sustain this marriage, like this plural marriage. It is very much, and that's also something that bugs. Like I do think the show does an extremely good job. And like I said, it's a testament to the writing. It's a credit to these writers, and like such a clear vision for this show. Bill the show does a good job of presenting this plural marriage and this family, particularly just the the immediate family, and even the compound family, who we'll get to, as like, this is just sort of what it is. It's not, as a viewer, I don't really think anybody is good or bad. I'm just sort of, or it's good versus bad. I just sort of feel like, it is what it is. And that's definitely, I think, how Sarah feels. I definitely think it's how Barb has come to feel. I do think Barb legitimately loves her sister wives and she loves Bill. But I think there's also a part of Barb that, like, if she had to do it all over again, she probably would have been like, no, I don't want to do this. And that's, like, really, really great on the show's part. But, like, also Bill himself he can't sustain this marriage. Like, he's taking Viagra to, like, have sex with all of them. He is not really emotionally or mentally there with his children. And he can't, like, how could you be? These women are really sort of what keep propping him up. And then there's also, Bill's own sort of personal ambitions and drive for what he wants out of his life.
Right.
And that he doesn't particularly care what Barb, Margie, or Nikki want, because you're here to, have sex with me and then, raise these kids and then support me for whatever I want to do.
Mm-hmm. I will say, to Bill's credit, I do feel like he cares about the wives. The Bill character is someone who, like, is irritating to me at times, and other times I can understand that the way he feels about polygamy is, in large part, both Bill and Nikki, indoctrination. And indoctrination is a very strong hold on people. Most people indoctrinate their children into the religion or the denomination that they feel is right. And most people have a very hard time completely shedding themselves of that ideology and that doctrine. So, more on Juniper Creek really quickly before I expound on Bill. Juniper Creek is a fundamentalist LDS compound run by the prophet Roman Grant. At the time that Bill was kicked out, to this very day, Nikki happens to be Roman's daughter. It's revealed, I think, in season 3 that she's like his 8th daughter from his 3rd wife or whatever, but she's one of his favorites. And they're in this marriage. As the show progresses, it's very clear that many times Bill feels like he's in over his head, especially financially, with the wives and the children. And it's revealed that Nicolette has issues with the principal insofar as being expected to, bear a certain amount of children for her husband. But they're both in it anyway, because what the hell else are you going to do when you don't really know anything else as being right?
Because I think Nikki is exposed, and Nikki is an incredibly complex character. But particularly for Nikki and Bill, they really believe this religion that they're practicing. They truly believe in it. And I think you have to just take that as, like, at face.
I agree with that. Listen, when I use the term indoctrination, I mean it at its face value. I mean, and being indoctrinated in a religion doesn't mean that you don't believe. It just means that's what you were exposed to in your formative years. And that matters. Most people are not going to be like Barb. They're not going to follow a different iteration of their religion. Most people are not going to be like Margine. They're not going to change religions for a relationship. Most people are going to be like Bill and Nikki. They're going to be exposed to something as a child. They're going to be convinced that it is right, and they're going to ride it till the wheels fall off, even in moments of doubt.
Right. And they do. Like, yeah, okay, yeah.
So one of the bigger subplots too in season 1 that also, like, trickles into other seasons. I love how the show never really ties anything up in one season, is Nikki's shopping addiction. Ooh, this girl got some hoarder tendencies, you guys.
She does.
But she the only reason she doesn't become a full-blown hoarder is because she buys so much shit that she realizes she's running out of room and she gives it away. She starts, like, shopping for other people and shit.
Right. Yeah. So that's, like, yeah. I mean, Nikki hates being off the compound, but she loves like that Sears catalog. She can't get enough of it.
She loves that HSN, that QVC.
Like QVC, she needs it. Oh, Nikki. She
And
needs
she's
it.
so right. Alex is so right that Nikki's a complex character. And don't get it twisted. This show is like you're neck deep in complex characters. Nikki is a person that I'm sure a lot of viewers took turns loving, hating, and feeling sympathy for. Just for that reason, she's my favorite character because I think she is masterfully written and masterfully acted. Nikki's shopping addiction too, I thought was great because of all the wives to give us shopping addiction to. I thought it was interesting that the one who was born and raised on a polygamous compound with just like bare necessities would be the one that has a shopping addiction, right? That someone who never really was in control of her life and never really had means would now have the means, have the freedom, and be like a kid in a candy store, completely out of control.
Right. Exactly. In season 1, we are some other characters that we're introduced to are Joey, Wanda, Bill's mom, who live on the compound. Now, Joey is Bill's brother, and Joey used to be a professional NFL player.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think he got like an injury, right? Or something.
He either had an injury or like it's not made clear, like because Frank makes fun of him for like fumbling a ball. I think it's either that or like it's possible that he has like terrible anxiety and affected his performance and he got his contract cut. But either way, he was released from the NFL for something.
For something, yeah. And then and after that, he couldn't, do life, so he went back to the compound. He went home. And he has a wife who she's like mentally, she just has mental illness. Like she has like a sort of probably, if we're going to armchair it, like borderline sort of personality, like a borderline personality disorder. And the big thing that is like sort of the contention around them is that like Joey doesn't want to like have a bunch of wives. And like, that's not something he's interested in at all. He's happy with just Wanda. And he really does love Wanda, like deeply, deeply loves her. But unfortunately, he won't give Wanda and Joey's another one that like I empathize with, but like I get irritated with because like he also won't like get Wanda the help that she clearly needs. Because she does need extra care. So the big thing that sort of happens with them is Wanda tries to poison Nikki's brother, Albie, who is sort of like a number 2 beneath Roman on the compound. And that plot will like throw them into Bill and the rest of the immediate family's orbit.
Mm-hmm. And prior to this, Wanda had been poisoning her father-in-law, Bill's father, Frank. Like first they thought that Bill's mother, Lois, did. And Lois, to her credit, was actually like taking the blame for this shit to protect her daughter-in-law, which is interesting. Lois is yet another super complex character. But yeah, like Alex said, Joey's really not really here for polygamy. Like he tried mainstreaming first when he and Bill were kids and they were kicked off the compound by Roman. And then again when he was playing pro ball. But he has bad nerves and he's someone who's a recovering alcoholic when we meet him. And he just really thrives in the simplicity of the commune. Even with Wanda, like a part of me, my heart goes out to him because some people would say, like, if you cared about this person, you would get them help, right? And I'm definitely in that camp. But I also had to consider the way they were raised, where your family takes care of you. And if you really care about someone, you are going to take care of them directly. Like you're not going to pawn them off on someone else. And Joey was really convinced for a while there that if he was just there enough and he loved her enough, Wanda would get better.
Right. But that's not how this works.
Right. That's not how mental illness works. He don't get it, you guys. Sometimes I look at Joey too, especially in season 2, and a part of me realizes that Joey and Bill's first wife Barb are actually the most compatible people on this show. And I think they felt it too. Like there was a moment when they realized, like Joey realized, I could be happy with someone sane, and she realized I could be happy with someone who didn't have to be talked into monogamy.
I was about to say, like, so to segue right into my next point. So let's talk about this sort of like, I think almost quasi emotional affair that happens between like Joey and Barb.
Girl, it was going to happen. It was happening.
What was happening? I was like, oh shit. Cause it's deeper than friendship. It's friendship, but it's way more like, I don't think you can just write it off as like a close friendship. It's absolutely like a full blown, like emotional affair. And it's crazy because it's happening right under Bill's nose. And it's like, he does not process it at all.
I hesitate to use the term emotional affair, simply because I think they're both aware of what was happening, and they both like made there was like a nonverbal understanding to like not let it go any further. But they have this deep communication and kinship and understanding of each other that is so clear, and that in their interactions, it doesn't even feel like they're seeking anything from each other, but like when they speak to each other, it's like a thirsty man finding an oasis in the desert, right? Like, oh, finally someone gets me, to the point where Wanda, who despite her mental illness, or maybe because of it, is highly perceptive. And she starts like questioning Bob, like, why is Joey always coming over here?
Right.
It's a really interesting relationship to see, because everything that's going on between them is clearly understood between them, but never explicitly stated. They know they could make each other happier. They know that there's something deeper going on here. They know that their partners are a hot ass mess. They know they really don't want the marriages that they're in, or they would want their partners. Not that that Barb doesn't love Bill, but she doesn't love polygamy. Not that Joey doesn't love Wanda, but he doesn't love the burden of her mental illness. That they could be really happy together, but it's like too little too late.
Right. It's like, it's a misconnection. And you'll always sort of see Barb really go up for Joey, always, even when Bill, like always, she will advocate for him and for Wanda.
Right. And Bill just thinks she's being a good sister-in-law to his brother. Mm-hmm. It should be stated too, like another connection that's happening in that relationship is that Wanda and Nikki are best friends. So even before Joey and Wanda were married, even before Nikki and Bill were married, Nikki and Wanda are best friends. And they're shown talking to each other quite often. We really don't get to see like a softer side, guards down side of Nikki until those initial phone calls in season 1 where she's calling Wanda or Wanda's calling her from the compound. And we see this side of Nikki that is a good friend and cares about her friend. And, you know, it makes us wonder, why isn't she this unreserved and unguarded around her sister wives?
Right. Because, you know, Nikki's just, and that's part of what makes Nikki so complex. Because Nikki I do think that Nikki genuinely is also somebody who, like you said, this is what she knows. This is it. Like, she's going to ride till the wheels fall off. But I do think she legitimately really does love Barb and Margie, and and Bill. But she also understands, but she's also somebody who is acting out of, you know, the sort of toxicity of the compound and sort of responding to what she has learned and seen growing up. So in terms of, she knows there's a hierarchy, and she knows and she understands that you have to be aggressive and fight for what you want and like what you need. And then also I think it's just a personality of trait of Nikki's that like anything that makes her feel insecure, she like seeks to destroy it. Mm-hmm. Like she seeks to attack it and to dominate it and to conquer it. I think that's also something that's just in her nature. Yeah. And it's fascinating. It's really, and it's great to see all those dynamics at play.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think Barb sees that about Nikki, right? She sees that this hostility is really just covering up for an insecurity. But like Marge is really like fooled by the false bravado, and she's really intimidated by Nikki circa season 1. Nikki grew up in this compound. Her father was a prophet. Her mother was her father's third wife, but his favorite and most trusted wife. So her mother does all his secretarial and bookkeeping. And as a result, her mother's children, herself, Albie, and her sister Evie, were the favored children, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we go from that environment to her. The show codes it as she's maybe 6, 7, 8 years, maybe even more than that, younger than Bill, but she remembers Bill vividly from her childhood. Like she maybe always idolized him or held a torch for him since she was very, very young. He was kicked off the compound. He married this mainstream LDS woman, and she waits, all these years to be his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And then she has to live in this mainstream community where all of the power and all the politics of the compound no longer matter, right? She's
Mm-hmm.
not someone of importance anymore. That can be very jarring.
Right. And then also, and then, I mean, as we'll find out later, she's married off to someone else first, right?
Right. When she was 15, she's married
15.
to Wanda's brother, JJ.
Right. And then she's given an annulment at the begging of Roman, when she begs Roman. But okay, so we talked really briefly about Ben and Marge. And you're right. There are episodes in season 1 where we will see like the sort of the beginnings of this like that only like comes to its natural conclusion, like I think in season 5. But I want to ask you something. So in like episode 3-ish, I want to say, Home Invasion, there is a scene where Bill walks in. Because like the compound family has like come to like the mainstream, like just they've left the compound and they've come to Nikki's house for like one of those kids.
Yeah, it's her son Wayne's birthday party.
Right, his birthday party. And so the scene is like Bill opens the door, and then you see Roman sitting in the chair next to the bed, and Nikki is on the bed, and she's sort of like giggling, like in a very like cultish, childish manner that's very not her, is giggling and like rubbing her head into Roman's hand. What do you remember? And then Bill, like,
I know the scene that you're talking about, but they were actually both on the bed. So he's like sitting up against the headboard, and she's lying stomach down. And when you open the door, it gives the illusion that her head is like somewhere near where his hand is placed, but also somewhere near his crotch area.
Mm-hmm.
And her giggling is actually not what disturbed me in that scene. What really disturbs me in that scene is that when Bill opens the door, Roman looks up at him, and Roman's face is drenched in guilt. Like he just got caught doing something that he shouldn't have been doing.
I mean, they both look like they get caught, right? So does it.
Yeah. When she turns around, we see her face, and we see she looks guilty, and she's like straightening out her clothes.
Right.
But like the first face we see is Roman, since like her head is faced away from us. And like Roman's initial reaction as soon as that door opens, like that was red flags and red alarms. The show alludes so many times to Nikki having been sexually abused or groomed by her father.
Right. Oh, and that's why I brought it up. I was like, did you get that? Like that was essentially like an allusion to the fact that like, Nikki had always been like groomed by her dad.
Right. And then like Bill's handling of the situation, like initially when he opens the door, I understand why he didn't say anything because Roman was still in their house. But then he proceeds never, ever, ever to bring it up to Nikki ever again.
Right. And then something that then further bugs is that like he then acts super dumb when he finds out later seasons, when he finds out everything that's been going on in the compound in terms of like the child brides and stuff. He acts like so stupid. And he's like, oh, I didn't realize. I'm like, wait, what?
Right, because when Roman comes to this birthday party, he comes with two of his wives. He comes with Adeline, Nikki's mother, his favorite, and Wayne's grandma, and he goes with his, this girl, this 14-year-old who's in pre-marriage placement to him called Rhonda. Okay? Mm-hmm. Like, apparently he's supposed to marry Rhonda when she turns 16. What the fuck do you mean you didn't know there was child brides?
Right. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, are you high? Like, I can't even. So then that's also somebody who we meet first season who will have who's an auxiliary character, but has a great arc and is also another, once I, like we said, everybody on this series is very complex. Rhonda is somebody who is extremely complex, who will be somebody that we meet time and time again. And poor Rhonda, she's also somebody who's very tragic, even though, I mean, because I feel like you understand why she does what she does, right. You know? All she's doing is what she knows how to do.
Rhonda's behavior is like, almost like a sociopathic version of Nikki, right? Yes. She carries on with the manipulations and the false bravado, but deeper than that, she's a liar, she's a user. And she's also someone, when she goes to mainstream culture, feels her power slipping away from her. One of the reasons that she's cool with and even happy to marry Roman is because he has so much power. And as his favorite, this gives her power by extension.
Right. Rhonda's plot, I think, in the first season is she comes to visit and then she stays, and she stays to audition for this monologue contest because she wants to be an actress. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't, and it's hard because you can see that she thinks this is like her way out of right. the compound, that she's gonna learn all this stuff. She's gonna win this contest, and she's gonna be able to just kiss that life goodbye. So there is a part of her that knows that, like, she doesn't want that, right? Right. But then she does audition, and she gets cut the first day in the competition, and she can't handle it. So then she just keeps lying and saying that she's going farther, when she didn't, and it sucks.
Does this all happen in season 1?
Like, her in the competition happens in season 1, yeah.
Oh, okay. There was so much going on in this season. And it never feels like too much. They did a really great job with this writing.
Yeah. The pacing is excellent on this show. Yeah.
No, the pacing is perfect. I want to talk very briefly for now, but he's a supporting character that has a bit of importance on the show. And that's Bill's best friend and fellow polygamist, Don. Don and his first wife, Peggy, work in managerial positions at one of Bill's Home Plus stores. He owns 2. And they're polygamists as well. One of the things that the show does so great, I thought, was, again, leaving breadcrumbs throughout seasons of shit that's not going to be tied up until later. I believe it was second episode, or maybe even the first episode, Don and Peggy and his Don's 2 other wives come over for a game of cards and some dinner, and we see 2 of the wives playing footsie with each other underneath the table. Season 3, they done left Don, you guys. They done left. They left, and they're like, we don't want you. We don't want Peg. We only love each other and our kids. You can bounce. And I remember thinking when I first saw that in season 1, I'm like, what is even the point of showing us that they're playing footsie? Like, they're never brought up again. But then they do leave Don. It is brought up. He's coming apart at the seams. He's, mourning these dissolved marriages and losing his children. And then it does play a big hand, right? When Bill's trying to get these casinos off the table. So these small things like that the writers do that you think is insignificant, pay attention. Like, this is not a show that you can afford to not pay attention to. Everything is done purposefully.
Everything's very purposeful. So then I guess so let's talk about this sort of thing that will take us into season 2, and we'll wrap up season 1. But so Teeny, which is Barb and Bill's youngest daughter between them, enters Barb into this like mother of the year like thing. And Barb gets it. They get a notification that they're going to be finalists. There has sort of been, so in season 1, there's also been this ongoing plot. Bill, Teeny, Ben, Sarah, everybody goes, they're there. And as they're like, about to announce the winner, somebody comes up in front. And this is like a very like prominent community, thing. And as they're like, we're getting ready to announce the winner, somebody comes up and whispers something to the person. And then they then, walk down and tell Barb that they have to leave, because that Barb and their whole family has to leave because they've been disqualified because somebody has told this like competition people that they're polygamists. And that is like, no, because mom of the year person is supposed to be like a statewide or like citywide moral role model. And she goes, and this absolutely crushes Barb. Crushes her to pieces. And that is how season 1 ends.
Bill's grandfather used to be the prophet of the compound, and the show basically tells you that Roman, who was his accountant, killed him to take his position. So Bill goes to Ernest, who is an old man in the community who's sickly, and basically asks him for his seat. And because Ernest knows that Roman is corrupt, so basically in exchange for getting him and his wives out of town, he gives Bill his seat, and then Bill gives the seat to Joey. Barb had really built herself up. She was feeling herself. She was so happy that her daughter Teeny had nominated her for this, and then at the last minute she's disqualified. Luckily for her, the people running the competition don't tell the audience why she was disqualified. So she can save a little bit of face, but this sends Barb into a complete breakdown. It's really sad to see, you guys, and just one of the many situations where we know that Barb is rethinking the decision she's made.
Right. It's like it's definitely like a slap in the face for her, like in terms of, you can see that she was sort of, and it sort of underscores this thing that you feel throughout the season, that she was sort of like living in a double consciousness, and this sort of like breaks that. She was like sort of compartmentalizing her life. So there's her life in private and her life in public, and she was compartmentalizing and separating the two. And that's clearly how she was like living with herself and living with this decision. This just like the whole situation just totally like broke that.
The thing about Barb is that she's someone who, again, one of the many complex characters, is we see as actually having much more power than she thinks she does. Because your first wife, you're the only one with legal rights, number one. Number two, LDS runs Utah. She could divorce Bill and make sure he never sees his children again, because by outing him as a polygamist. And the LDS Church would fully embrace her back in their arms for having had to suffer as a polygamist wife. But Barb is in the situation she's in because she loves Bill. She's not a Nikki who believes that this is the right way to be. Although I believe Nikki loves Bill as well. She also believes in the principle, right? But Barb and Marge are people that we really see as being here because they really, really love Bill. Maybe Marge has some other issues as well, insofar as seeing the stability of this family and having wanted that as someone who didn't have a lot of stability growing up. You know, her dad walked out on her. Her mom was an alcoholic. But like Barb is someone who really doesn't need Bill as much as she thinks she does. She doesn't need this marriage as much as she thinks she does. So many times when Barb is having these like crises of consciousness, it's difficult to like entirely sympathize with her because I'm like, sis, why are you here?
Right. She doesn't really need this. And she's also, and then she is legitimately also all of the things that mom award represented, right? Like she volunteers with the hospice. She, takes care of her kids. Like she's very active, like in their lives. She's very beautiful. She could find somebody else. She doesn't really, this isn't something that, she's built an identity for herself that's it's very significant. She doesn't really need this.
Right. And Barb is a very, like, from the moment you meet her, you know that this is a person who's supposed to be coded as intelligent before she even opens her mouth. There is a way to dress your characters and do their hair and makeup to like read as smart, quote unquote. Barb is a substitute teacher. Bob is university educated. And really, Barb gives more legitimacy to Bill than any other of his wives ever could.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, what you see Barb going through is really just like sacrifices made in the name of love. And I'm like, I want to see a show where a man sacrifices this much to be with a woman. I would like to see it.
Right. She does. She sacrifices so much to the point where like she gets like employment opportunities and like they expect her to turn them down because so that like it doesn't disrupt like their nights or whatever. I'm just like, oh, yikes.
Two cool things happen when before season 1 ends. The first is that we get to see Nikki without that braid. The compound women often wear their hair in like a single braid or a French braid or some sort of pinned up style. The only one who doesn't really wear their hair like this is Lois, who keeps her hair short. And we also find that Margine is pregnant in episode 11. So Nikki had been trying to get pregnant, or so she said. I think she just, it's revealed that she's been on birth control this whole time and only said that to like, appease Bill over something she'd done, like her astronomical debt that he finds out about this season. Mm-hmm. But Margine is the one who ends up pregnant with her and Bill's third child together. So balls are rolling in this season. We met another really complicated character this season, Adeline, Nikki's mom. We can talk about that more in season 2. But season 1 ends with Barb in devastation. Albie is in the hospital, having been poisoned by antifreeze by Wanda, Joey's wife. And the whole Henrickson family, well, not the whole family, but Bill and he and Barb's kids are completely devastated at Barb's public humiliation.
And that's season 1. So season 1, good, bad, or basic?
Season 1 was excellent.
Same. Season 1 is excellent. If I have to pick some episodes, although I think you should watch the series in its entirety. But if I had to pick some episodes, I really like season 1, episode 2, Viagra Blue. Season 1, episode 3, Home Invasion. Season 1, episode 5, Affair. Season 1, episode 6, Roberta's Funeral. Season 1, episode 9, A Barbecue for Betty. Season 1, episode 10, The Baptism. And then season 1, episode 12, The Ceremony.
Yeah, and I want to say that every single actor on this show is strong. I would say the weakest actors on this show, and don't come for me, I'm literally like pulling this from a very stacked cast, would be Douglas Smith, who plays Ben Henrickson, and Amanda Seyfried, who plays Sarah Henrickson, Bill's 2 oldest children. Of the characters that we see the most of, they would probably be the weakest because everyone like really goes in hard. Even characters, auxiliary characters like Wanda or like Lois are so strong in every single scene that we see them in, right? Yeah. And even Amanda, listen, like
we're saying Amanda Seyfried, but Amanda Seyfried, who plays Sarah, is really great in this. She's excellent in this. I understand why she became like a huge deal after this show. She's very, very good. She does a great job. Yeah, Ben's probably, if we have to pick, is like the weakest.
Let's jump into season 2. I love that they don't do a jump of several weeks or several months. I think maybe it's been a couple of weeks, but Barb is still very much dealing with the aftermath of the Mother of the Year ceremony. And when she drops Teenie off at summer school, it becomes clear that the people there know and what happened, like the reason why she was disqualified, and they no longer want her teaching there.
Right. It picks up 2 weeks after. After the incident, because I think in episode 1, Damage Control, Bill says she hasn't been out of the house in 2 weeks. You got like he's talking to Marge and Nikki, and he goes, she hasn't been out of the house. She hasn't left the house for 2 weeks. You guys can't continue to coddle her. She needs to get up and take Teenie to school.
Which I thought was, and again, I'm always gonna keep going back to the indoctrination. Because he was raised in this way, he really doesn't understand what a crushing blow this was to Barb, right? Like, he's very much in the what's the big deal frame of mind. And I'm like, ugh, you're infuriating. Like, imagine not having been raised that way. Imagine living in a world that is not that way, right? And being exposed this way. And I believe that Barb loves her sister wives, right? But she doesn't love the inconvenience of always having to hide them.
Right. That's a huge burden, and it's a burden on all of them, but it's particularly a burden on her. And yeah, so like you said, they have, and people know. And Bill, I guess to his credit not even to his credit, he's upset that people know because it could affect his Home Plus business. That's why he's upset. He's not upset because, my God, like, my wife was, like, humiliated. Like, a wife that, didn't even want this shit really in the first place, who I took advantage of, was completely devastated. It's like, okay, but what's going to happen to Home Plus, and what's going to, like, yeah.
He's like, I have 2 stores. I need to open a 3rd store. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? That's sort of his mind frame. And to Marge and Nikki's credit, they both they do call him out on that. Particularly Marge. Marge is like, she was humiliated. Like, she was completely humiliated. You get that, right? And Marge and Nikki are the only ones that take it seriously when Barb leaves. And this is where the relationship between the sister wives really shines, because it's not the first or the last time when one of them is really hurting and the other 2 will rally around for support, where Bill is no fucking where to be found.
Nowhere. Like, who knows where he is?
Like, it's crazy. So they have to be each other's constant supports, companions, and co-parents, right? Because they for the most part, they're mothering their own children, but they're extended parents to the other's children.
Right.
And Bill is just the guy that eats meals with them and that they take turns fucking.
Right. Like, ugh.
So I'm like, why do y'all even need the man? Listen. But yeah, he has 2 Home Plus stores. He wants to open up a 3rd. And that actually brings us back to what was revealed in season 1, was that when he opened the first store, he actually got some of his startup money from Roman in exchange for 15% of the business. So Roman owns 15% of his business, and Roman's under this delusion that he can own 15% of all future businesses.
Right.
And I'm just like, nah, fam. But I feel too that it's either implied or stated that this business loan had something to do with Nikki being allowed to marry Bill, because as I said when we were reviewing season 1, Bill's grandfather used to be Prophet. So Lois basically used to be who Nikki was, the daughter of the Prophet, had all this power. And then Roman disposed of Bill's grandfather, took his money, took his wives. His children were left with nothing. and, kicked out his grandsons when they got of age, and had also kicked out Bill's uncle, Lois's brother, right? He had kicked them all off the compound. I guess because he didn't want competition for like more wives. But Roman has 14 wives. Like we learned this in season 1, and Rhonda was going to be like wife number 15 or something.
Right.
Like it's crazy, like the power dynamics that were being set up there. But one thing we do learn is that had Bill stayed on the compound, Nikki would have probably still ended up being one of his wives.
Yeah.
Because even if his grandfather had stayed prophet, Roman is still the prophet's accountant. That's what his role was at the time. And Nikki is still Roman's daughter. That would have probably been like a very likely match to have occurred. She would have either ended up being Bill or Joey's, one of their wives.
Right. Yeah, Barb leaves. What's interesting about it is once Bill finally realizes this shit's like really serious, with her being gone, is Barb and Bill have a conversation, and they finally sort of verbalize what we've been saying, in that Barb is like, you took advantage of me when I was in a low place and I didn't want this life, and you just sort of pushed it on me. And I guess to Bill's credit, like he's like, yeah, I did do that. And he does say that he's sorry. But then he's also like, but it's what you have now. So are you going to go? You're going to stay.
Yeah. To his credit, Bill actually does apologize to his wives on many occasions for like being in the wrong about things. It's super interesting to me that Barb too runs away to Don and Peg's house, right?
Right.
Because I'm like, but then I realized, like, who can she run to? Her family is more or less like her mother and her sister have more or less disowned her on account of living in polygamy. So like, who does she really have anymore? And then we just think about how much she's really sacrificing here, a relationship with her own family to make this marriage work.
Right. And I guess also the fact that she does run away to who she runs to is a signifier that it's really just like a crisis of consciousness and thinking about what she's going to do versus a hard I'm leaving you. Because if it was like a hard I'm leaving you, she would go to her sister or her mom, because her sister and her mom do make it clear that if you were to divorce Bill, like you could come back to this family. If you say goodbye, if you wash your hands of that, we're gonna be here for you, because that's something that the sister more or less relays to her.
Yeah, they make it very clear that, like, Barb, you're just one divorce away from having your family back. And it's interesting to me, and this is something that I see throughout the show, but like, and with other characters, but especially with Barb. She can be having all these doubts and all these reservations and moments of insecurity about the relationship, which I think all the wives go through at one point or another. But as soon as an outsider challenges the relationship, that makes her dig her heels in. And I'm like stubbornness is 50% of the reason why y'all here. Like, as soon as someone challenges, like, this is not okay, this is not natural, this is not right, like, she digs her heels in further. I love Bill. I love my sister wives. They were there for me, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, sis, where was this energy when you were sick of their shit?
Oh, gosh. So in season 2, I want to talk a bit about Ben and Sarah. So Ben gets this girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And he, like, after a lot of prodding and crisis and on his part of like, whatever, he like has sex with her. And that like flips his world upside down. Like,
yeah. So we knew Ben had a girlfriend, Bryn, in season 1, but we don't meet her till season 2. He basically is coerced into having sex with her to try to keep the relationship. And he feels mad guilty, but he likes it because
he really likes it. Yeah,
he keeps doing it. He keeps doing it, you guys. And And it kind of ties into another plot with with Ben and his friend Jason, who's part of like a Mormon boys club called Straight Edge. Straight Edge is about no liquor, no meat, no women. It's like a Mormon brotherhood with deep homoerotic undertones.
And it's more hardcore because they get tattoos.
They get tattoos, which I believe it's very strongly against the religion, but okay. Like most religions, most denominations of Christianity and aren't cool with you branding yourself that way. But okay. And luckily he doesn't join Straight Edge because he's not that simple. But Bryn does the right thing. When Sarah catches him having sex, and then later the family finds out he's having sex, he takes one of his mother's rings and tries to propose to this girl and use an engagement to make the fact that they're fucking okay. And she tells him, like, listen, this is not okay. Like, we're like 16 years old, 17 years old. You're not ready for this. I hope you meet a nice Mormon girl who's into polygamy, but I gotta go.
Right. And then not only that, but like then Barb and her have like a conversation. And Barb, shout out to Barb. Barb knows exactly what to say to her to make her like run for the hill.
Right, because Barb knows that Ben wants to be a polygamist, right? So she's like, listen, this was my struggle as first wife. I still struggle. I don't know what you're going to do, but this is the life Ben wants. And as a good wife, you're just going to have to support him. I think that's Barb's problem too, is that like she wants so badly to be a good wife that she just keeps getting fucked over. But
right. And then yeah, Ben goes running for the hills.
Their reaction though to Ben fucking is an interesting one because it's not one that I see a lot on television when parents catch their sons having sex, right? It's usually a reaction reserved for daughters. They're like, oh my God, no, I'm crushed. I can't believe this. My world is spinning. We didn't raise you like this.
Right, like Bill is devastated. Bill is like completely devastated. He's like, I thought we raised you better than this. I thought like I had talked to you about like what this really means. And like, I thought you knew. No.
Barb's crying in the bathroom, you guys. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
But you know, there's a Mormon saying in LDS communities and polygamists, that, you know, it's better to see your children in a casket than to see them separated from their chastity.
Well, girl.
Yeah, it's a lot, but like, I'm going to go on record and say that I am totally cool with my kid not dying. I feel like this viewpoint is super extreme. And I also feel like it's one of the things that, it's why a lot of religious fundamentalists marry so young, because they confuse lust with love. And try to scrub out the shame of lustful feelings or premarital sex with marriage.
Right, which will also, the idea that you're talking about will also come up when we get to Anna, who we meet in season 2.
Mm-hmm. As well as Sarah and Scott's relationship.
I was about to say, so then next on to Sarah and Scott. But like, here's the thing about Sarah and Scott. So Sarah goes to this ex-Mormon, the eldest daughter of Barb and Bill. Sarah, she goes to this ex-Mormon meeting, and she meets Scott Whitman, who is played by I was gonna say Jesse Pinkman. I'm like, that's not his real name.
It might as well be.
It might as well be, though. Yes, she meets Scott Whitman, played by Aaron Paul, who is completely and totally age inappropriate for Sarah, but yet will probably be the most stabilizing and like level-headed force in Sarah's life, besides her really good friend Heather, played by Tina Majorino.
Yeah, so Heather and Scott were very interesting people. I'm going to go on record and say I really couldn't stand Heather because personally, I would never be friends with a Heather. But Heather is a fantastic friend to and for Sarah. She's such a good friend. Like, she's a conservative. She's a Republican. She's all the things that I wouldn't want in a friend, but she's all the things that Sarah needs in a friend, and is a really she's like home base for Sarah in a lot of ways because our family is in constant rigmarole and drama and change as a result of the wives and the children and dealing with Roman all the time. And Heather's very constant. Heather's very steady. Heather is a very calm, honest, kind, steadfast person. And Scott is a lot of these things too. I really, really like Scott. It is age inappropriate. He's like 10 years older than Sarah. And in a lot of ways, their relationship actually reminds me a lot of Bill and Margie's relationship. Except he's not a fundamentalist. He's not even LDS. And because of that, he treats Sarah with more respect than Bill's wives ever get.
Yes, he really does, which is wild. And that's why I'm like, that's why their relationship is so interesting. I'm like, he really is, he's completely inappropriate for her, but like completely age inappropriate because Sarah is 16 or 17.
She's 17.
Sarah's and he is.
Hold on really quickly. This is where the show drops the ball because she tells Scott she's 18, but then in the very next episode, when Bill's talking to Sarah, he says, "Until you're 18 and off to college, you're my responsibility," which implies that Sarah's only 17.
Oh well, I think she purposefully lied to him because she was feeling him from the jump.
Yeah, but then when she confesses that she was lying about her name and everything like that, and then she's like, he's like, "How old are you really?" She's like, "I'm 18. I didn't lie about that." And I'm like, "Okay, girl." So Scott is between 10 and 11 years older than her. It's really, really inappropriate. This relationship could have been a breeding ground for all kinds of abusive, predatory behavior.
But I mean, to the show's credit, to the actor's credit, it's not. Which I guess maybe, I don't know, in life, sure, maybe that happens. But like, it's not. He treats her with a lot of respect and he takes her very seriously. And like I said, he'll be the only really, I think, non-judgmental and clear and level-headed force in her life, pretty much.
Right. And I mean, in real life, the age gap is a bit smaller. There's 7 years between Aaron Paul and Amanda Seyfried. It's clear on the show that he's older than her, but like his character, I guess because of the way that he talks to her and because he treats her as a partner, you never get the feeling that there is this like gross power dynamic insofar as age, right?
Right.
He always speaks to her at like an equal. He doesn't treat her like a child or, use those like those age tactics of like, "Oh, you're too young to understand this XYZ." Mm-hmm. He never talks to her like that. And we're kind of rooting for Sarah and Scott because Sarah is someone who's shown as from season 1 really coming apart at the seams. She's starting to unravel under the pressure of this family that she doesn't even want to be in and the pressure of trying to live out her life normally outside of their home, right?
Right. And
she cares about them all, but she don't want to be married to them all.
Right. And it is hard because she says that. She's like, "I love my family. I love Marge, love Nikki, love my half brothers and sisters, but I don't want this. I know that this is something that I actively do not want, and nor do I think it's right." And a credit to Sarah herself is that like Sarah herself is also a very independent-minded person and really does act older than she is because when everything happens with the fallout of Barb, she's like, she also says to Barb like, "Well, what are you gonna do? You gonna leave? Like, because if you're gonna leave, then you just that's what you just gotta do." And Barb just kind of looks at her. Can also very much view everything that's sort of happening around her in a clear way.
Right. So one of the interesting things, and this is a character that I said I wanted to bring up again, in episode 4, Roman ends up blaming Adelaide for not being more welcoming to Rhonda, because Rhonda runs away from them, and he threatens to expose Bill. And Adeline undermines Bill for the very first time. There's a tape basically of a conversation between Roman and Bill that incriminates Bill heavily. And she keeps telling Roman she can't find the tape. And eventually when Bill calls about the tape, Adeline tells him there is no tape and destroys it. And we know she's not doing this to protect Bill. She's doing it for Nikki. But she's someone who's never really expressed any love or warmth towards her daughter.
Right.
Adeline is so complicated because we can tell a lot of Nikki's behaviors were learned from her.
I was about to say they're very similar people.
Right, like that I'm gonna pretend to be in charge and pretend that everything's under control. The false bravado. You know, she worked her way up to being Roman's favorite, and being his most trusted wife because she was the most supportive. She says she was the one that told him he could be prophet. And it's implied that she's the one who put the idea into his head of getting rid of Bill's grandfather, their first prophet. She has a strong position of power, but she's never lost sight of the fact that the power that she has is a side effect of always being in Roman's good graces, right?
Right.
She knows that, her position is very, very tenuous. So she supports him in whatever he does because she gets power and, a bit more freedom than his other wives or the other women on the compound by proxy. In this season, when Rhonda runs away and she's living with Bill and then she's living in the group home, we really see, like Alex said, a desire and a want in her for more as well, right? We know that she wants more than just to be one of the prophet's many wives, but she doesn't really have skills that will allow her to thrive out here yet. It's not going to be something immediate. She's smart, girl. She can learn things, right? But for a while, she's going to struggle to adjust to the mainstream. And Bill and Joey, better than anyone, knows what it's like to struggle outside in the outside world after having been raised on the compound.
Right. And to Rhonda's credit, Rhonda does eventually land on her feet. But I was never in doubt that Rhonda was going to land on her feet because Rhonda, like you said, she learns super, super fast. And I think one of the ways in which we see this is when Rhonda sort of, and listen, it's real and it's not, in that Rhonda immediately cries these crocodile tears about Roman, and which is real, but you also get the sense of and like I said, shout out to this writing and the acting is so freaking masterful. You get the sense that she is sort of she's playing it up because right there, all these cameras come and they interview her and she gets on television, and later on, and even later on when they're sort of shuffling Rhonda between from Barb's house to she stays with Scott for a period, and they're sort of hiding her, shuffling her around. When she's staying with Scott, she starts screaming and crying, and Sarah has to come over, and Sarah gets there and she's screaming and crying through the door, and Sarah knocks on the door and Rhonda lets her in, and Rhonda immediately is like, Scott, he raped me. He told me to touch his private parts, and then and
yeah, well, to her credit, she said he tried, but I'm like, girl, this is why you got cut the first round. That was the worst acting I've ever seen.
She's like, oh my God, he tried to rape me, and Sarah just kind of tilts her head and looks at her, and then Sarah just blows out a sigh, and she's like, what do you want? And then Rhonda drops it immediately, and she's like, listen, I want to stay with Heather. I'm tired of this shit.
Yeah.
Which is really ugly, but I also think that piece of writing is so smart because and not smart, but it's just it speaks, there's so much layers in that she would specifically use that because it's and listen, to be completely and totally perfectly clear, believe women. When women say that they're assaulted, believe them, and we believe them, and take their story seriously. But it is interesting when you look at it through the context of white women historically using rape specifically against people of color, specifically against Black male actors, in order to ignite this sort of benevolent sexism that in where white men and society at large will come to save them. It's interesting that Rhonda immediately picks up on that, or immediately understands very quickly the context of her victimhood, and the power in that victimhood, and how, and her understanding immediately that she can exploit that sort of benevolent sexist ideal in our culture to then try to parlay that into money and status and clout for herself. Because she learned, like, in terms of like and like, listen, in season 2 we'll start getting into like some race stuff, and like the show does not even kind of know what it needs to do in terms of race. Like, it totally fumbles the bag, but it is smart because the fact that Rhonda knows that like a white woman saying that like she's been raped is like the immediate thing that will get you attention, or like the immediate thing that will get people to come and like give you things, is so smart, like, in a sense.
Right. I thought it was really cool that like Heather, Scott, and Sarah were both very clear that Rhonda was a manipulator and a liar, right? And she is absolutely playing up this thing for the cameras, because when anyone speaks with Rhonda privately, it's very clear that she does not view herself as a victim. That's not to say that she wasn't a victim on that compound, on account of like, being the next child bride in line. But she really like got off on the idea of marrying the prophet. The issue is that she knew that these people wanted to see her as a victim. So she played up these ideals and these constructs of trauma for attention. It's like, look, if I can't get attention as an actress, then I will get attention as a professional victim, basically.
Right.
And we have that journalist, right, who was raised on a similar compound, who basically sees all of them as victims. She sees Rhonda as a victim. She sees Nikki as a victim. And they are, to an extent, right? Everyone on the compound is, to varying extents, especially the women. But just not the way that she thinks they are.
Right. Like, it's just a credit. It's such a credit to the show that, like, and it's one of the things that I love about this show, and that it can, and I think it does accurately portray like what it is to be like a complicated victim. You can be a victim, but like you can still be an asshole. Like,
right.
And your victimization, and like your victimization, and or in the things that were done to you matters, but like what you do personally also matters as well once you're at that situation. And I think writing that, writing out those ideas in a very fair way is an extremely hard thing to do. And I think acting out, and I think the acting, having to take that material and then act it out properly, is an extremely hard thing to do. So it's just such a credit to the show.
I absolutely agree. So I want to talk about one of the bigger things. Well, one minor and one bigger. The first is the minor, that Wayne, quote unquote, runs away. He doesn't run very far. But when Wayne runs away, Bill is so angry, right? Because he has to go looking for his son, telling the neighbors that it's his neighbor's son that's missing. He can't even claim his relationship to his own son in this neighborhood, right?
Right.
And Nikki's frustrated by it too, but this is the first time Bill has ever gotten a taste of what it's like for his second and third wives who can't claim him and whose children can't claim him in public, right?
Right.
And finally, it resolves the issue of Wayne going to Catholic school, because the Catholic school is so far away that Bill can finally claim Wayne and Nikki in public.
Right.
So I thought that was a really great turn. It's something that's resolved within one season. Now, the larger plot is Anna, who would become Bill's fourth wife. We meet
Right.
her in season 2. Margine realizes that Bill's seeing someone, and she basically sets herself up to meet Anna as well, without Bill's knowledge or consent, and without Anna having any knowledge that she is married to Bill. The whole thing was, the manipulation levels were something that Nikki and Adelaide would be proud of, to be honest with you.
They would be.
And I don't even think Marge knew that that's what she was doing, but that's absolutely what it was.
Poor Marge. Marge just wanted...
Marge just wanted what?
She just wanted a friend.
She did, but she was absolutely trying to manipulate this relationship between Anna and Bill, and towards the end, force a relationship, right? Because Bill and Anna get along, and Bill and Anna have chemistry. That alone does not marriage material make.
Right, which, once again, we circle back to this idea of, like, lust does not equal love, right? Bill is super into, like, Bill is, I think, is just, like, turned on by her. And, like, Anna is very, like, sexy. Like, you know, Anna definitely, like, has, like, a vibe about her, you know? She is, like, this diner and this waitress, but, like, she's very sharp-minded. She's got this great, sexy, like, Eastern European accent that's happening. And she's just, you know, doing her own thing, which is always, I think, you know, always great.
It's interesting because later on it's revealed that the wives that get along best with Anna are Barb and Margine, and I thought that was so fitting because Anna really has the best qualities of Barb and Margine.
Yeah.
She has a lot of wit, she has a lot of sex appeal, she has a lot of charm. Also, she's very sharp. She's a quick learner. She knows how to comport herself in public spaces. Like, just really the best qualities of his second and third wife. I can see him gravitating to someone like that. But, and I must reiterate, these are the same qualities you already have in your first and third wife. Like, why do you need a fourth wife?
Why do you need one? You don't. Yeah. That's hilarious.
It's like, you can't just be wifing up everybody that remind you of someone you love. That's not how they work. That's not how that works.
It is how it works. So something really quick I want to talk about that happens in season 2 is I want to talk about the episode where Barb's mom is, like, getting remarried. It's an episode where we sort of go deeper into Barb and Barb's life. But basically, Barb's mom is getting remarried, and her sister calls, and the sister, you know, or is it the sister or the mom? It might be the mom. I might be getting it mixed up. My apologies if I am. But either the mom or either Barb's mom or her sister calls, and the way that they spin it is that, like, Barb and Barb's kids are invited to this wedding.
Just the kids, actually.
No, I'm saying the way that they spin it on the phone makes it sound like Barb and Barb's kids are invited. So then when Barb shows up, they do this super ugly thing where she goes, oh, no. Like, it's just the kids. Like, you're not supposed to be here. And, like, Barb's face when she hears it is like, oh, God, it's so ugly. It's devastating.
And she's forced to crash her mom's own wedding.
They do. They try to kick her out. And she's like, no. Like, and she goes, I was under you made it sound like I was supposed to be here. I'm going to stay. And, you know, everybody does this thing. It's like, do you want to make a scene at your own mother's wedding? And then Nikki, because, like, Nikki has never found, Nikki does not know what it means to mind her own business. Has, like, secretly, like, followed them to this wedding and then calls Bill on the phone and is like, get down here.
Right.
Which is nuts, which makes, like, the whole thing go, like, even more nuts. So, but I just bring it up because it's ugly. It's ugly, and it's interesting, and also it's just interesting to see the dynamic between Barb's sister, particularly Barb's sister, who likes to pass herself off as, like, this saint when she's like when she's collecting children from other countries that are, like, stolen.
Oh my God. Barb's sister is Barb's sister's super annoying. Like, she flaunts like the Asian daughter that she and her husband bought or adopted. And like, she makes the most racist comment. She's like, in a year's time I'll have her saying y'all. And like, it gets off on how well she's helped her Asian daughter assimilate into this like foreign culture. But it's very clear Barb's sister's jealous of her, and that Barb was very clearly their mother's favorite prior to becoming a polygamist. And now, as much as she wants Barb to leave polygamy behind, she enjoys being the favorite now, right?
Right.
But that phone conversation was interesting because most people would assume that they were invited, but the way the conversation was worded, it's never directly stated that Barb is invited, right? It's just something that you could, it's an assumption that you could, like, it's the natural assumption to make. And that's why I hated what her sister did so much, because she was clearly gaslighting the fuck out of her.
She was. She gaslit the fuck out of her. And it's even more awful because it's like, you know, Barb misses her family and the fact that they called her, right? Because I'm sure she's called, because the show sort of alludes that like she's called many times, but her mother refuses, right? Like, this family is like has disowned her, but they call her and they're like, we want to make amends. We want to like at least try. Which,
right,
when you use that kind of language, it's like, of course you're assuming that you're invited as well.
Right. So what her sister says is something along the lines of, we would like you to bring the kids to the wedding, which one would naturally assume me and the kids are going, right? But the other way to read that sentence is, we want you to bring the kids to the wedding, which reads as of, we want you to drop them kids off and dip.
Like, they're not, which is
like, why would she ever assume that, right? She's not the nanny, she's your daughter.
Oh gosh, it's so ugly. But also,
and I mean, this is where I love Nikki, honestly. Every time we have to interact with Barb's mom, and especially her sister, I love Nikki. Because she and Barb have their problems, all the sister wives do, but she ain't gonna let nobody talk shit about Barb. She not gonna let nobody disrespect Barb.
Right. She's gonna go to bat, which is also why you love Nikki. Like, Nikki's gonna fight anybody. Nikki's got smoke for everybody.
Like, when Albie shows up to the house threatening the family, she's like, listen, you ever show up at my family's house again, I will kill you.
Like, don't you ever.
Don't do this ever again. Don't make that mistake. Like, Nikki's not one to be fucked with. When the chips are down, you definitely want her fighting on your side and not against you. But this is around the wedding time is when Barb calls her mom and basically tells her mom, like, Ben wants to be a polygamist. I'm not down with this shit. I want you to take him for the summer. And it's crazy because you're living in polygamy, but she wants your mom to basically reprogram your son for you to be anti-polygamy.
Right. Which is like, Barb.
That shit was, it's like, Barb, honey, you know this is not okay. You have to know that.
Like, yeah, you have to. There's no way. Oh, and then season 2 further goes like a bit further in this this Ben and Margine plot. Like, there's a bit more like rumblings of it. In that, like, yeah, and like the way it's played, and I love it because I think this direction is actually is really good, and in the way that they choreograph the actors is really good. I think they're in they're in like a pool or something. Oh yeah, so what Barb's like, a friend of Barb's, like the other friend who knows that they're like polygamists, comes over, and Margine and Ben are like messing around in this pool, and the woman even says, like, can your kids like keep it down? But it's Margine and Ben, and they're messing around, like, and it's in a goofy way, but in that goofy way that like feels really reminiscent of like two teenagers who are like maybe dating.
Yes. It just reeked of middle school crush to me. Um
Yeah, and Barb is like she, and credit to her, she doesn't let her face show it when she goes back to like her friend, she doesn't show it on her face. And when she talks to Margine at first, she doesn't show it on her face, but Barb is kind of shook.
and it's not the first time either.
And it's
In
not the
season 1, when like Margie is walking around the house in these tiny tiny little robes and she's hugging all over Ben, like like Barb looks visibly alarmed.
alarmed. Then Barb has like but this time Barb like has a conversation with her. She's like, I'm concerned about you and Ben. And Marge is like, I'm disgusted. Like, how dare you? Like, I think of myself as his mother. Like, and yeah, but that will turn.
Right. I mean, at this point, we can still give Margine the benefit of the doubt that she's just a very gregarious, flirtatious person, and that Ben is the one who has feelings for her, feelings that are not reciprocated. And she's really trying to sell this idea, but by season 3, we realize it's not just Ben.
Right.
What's interesting about that relationship is that Margine, at the age that she has given the family to be, is only 5 years older than Ben. She is much more age appropriate for him than for his father. And so it kind of brings us back to why Bill and Joey and their Uncle Eddie were all kicked off the compound. This is actually a very common thing in fundamentalist LDS communities, where older, more powerful men will literally throw boys off the compound so that they have less competition for the younger wives.
Right. Because obviously, like, if you're, and particularly on the compound, right? Because if you're like an old elder and you just probably sit around all day, you're sitting around all day, just like accounting or doing whatever. You're not like one of these like 19 or like 17 or 20-year-old boys who are like, lifting huge barrels of potatoes or, doing hard labor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
Because it's a compound, so like they try, I guess, at their best to grow their own food and stuff, and there are chores and things to be done. So you're not doing that work anymore. So your body is not like, right?
Right. And you're old. Like, even if your body was like amazing, you're going to take the amazing body young man or the amazing body old man. It's not a hard choice.
Hard choice.
And, basically you have a bunch of hebephiles who are no longer attracted to their older wives because the wives have gotten older just as the husband has. And they want a new younger wife, or maybe they're not a hebephile. Maybe they're just power mad. And how many wives you have is a direct reflection of how much money you have. Right.
Right.
So they just want to collect more wives. And you can't do that when you have all these young, virile young men running around. So he and Joey and Eddie essentially became, what are the Lost Boys. And the Lost Boys are a very real thing. Boys kicked off these compounds, have no means of navigating the outside world, and without direct help and support, will fall to the wayside. This is how Joey developed his alcoholism, was when he was kicked out the first time.
Right. One of the other bigger plots that happens this season is this Weber game video, like Weber video game plot that happens, it's like in the mid stages, and also Nikki develops a full blown gambling addiction. That's hilarious.
Yeah, she's definitely in the early stages of it. You can tell she's very interested.
She's very interested because when Bill goes to sort of like sell this idea of the game, because like Barb is not cool with this gambling thing from like a moral standpoint.
Right, because Mormons don't gamble. It's against their religion. That's why when a Mormon wants to gamble, they had to cross state lines and do it in Nevada, because gambling is actually outlawed in the state of Utah because LDS runs the state. So Weber Gaming provides like casino games, and apparently Roman had his eye on the very same thing. And this is where we meet another polygamous family, the Greens, run by Hollis Green, who are very, very large and very, very deadly. And apparently they've been in hiding in New Mexico, hiding from authorities.
Right.
But now they're back to like do some damage, and it's not pretty.
And the Greens are super interesting. The Greens, yeah, they're essentially like the fundamentalist mafia. And something that is actually super interesting about the Greens is Selma. And something that will continue to be interesting, I think, about Big Love in general is that there are all these like queer underpinnings in the show. And we see one in the Greens and in Selma. She's she's the wife to Hollis Green, but she is, and they don't make it clear if she, and I say she because the show never really makes it clear if she considers herself like a they or them, like, or non-binary, but she does like, is mask presenting. She wears suits. Yeah. She keeps her hair short and pinned up, and not short in the way that Lois does, but she styles it like the men do. Always in suits, always very mask presenting, and is not feminine in any sort of way, really. Yeah, I always got the impression that Sarah was a trans man. I don't know if she ever heard the term transgender or knows what that is. I mean, it's clear that they know what homosexuals are, right? Right. But I don't think she's ever heard the term transgender. But for me, that was very clearly what she was. Like, she was a gay trans man, because it's very clear that she loves Hollis and loves their relationship, and that Hollis has a lot of love and a lot of respect for her, actually. But I felt like Selma might not be a she. I think Selma might be a he. The interesting thing about Selma is that Selma is sibling to Roman Grant. So she's stuck between two very powerful men. And Hollis and Roman do not get along. Right. They are at constant odds with each other. Yeah. So she and Roman have the same parents, and this is revealed in the next season. And there's a scene where, and this is why I felt that she might not be non-binary, because he basically makes her wear a dress, not change her hair or anything like that, but he makes her wear a dress. She's deeply uncomfortable to the point of looking pained while wearing that dress. Right. I think she even like, she starts to choke up a bit. She has to keep herself, or he has to keep himself from, like, crying. Right, right. Yeah. And this is where, and we've had this conversation before, where even if people don't have the vernacular or like the education to express an ideal, that doesn't mean that the idea or that feeling doesn't exist, right? Like, just because she's never heard of a transgender or non-binary before doesn't mean that Selma might not very well be a trans man or a non-binary person. Right. And Selma's just one of like many sort of queer underpinnings that will like happen in this show. I think we also find out that Albie, Nikki's brother, is gay. Yeah, that's something that they also like breadcrumbed, right? They strung Albie's sexual preferences along for a long time. Now, I don't know if Albie is gay or bisexual, because they do tell us that they do basically make it clear he has a very strong relationship with his wife, Laura, who is his closest wife. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what their sex life is like. I do know that they have children. I do know that she feels very close to him. But whatever attraction he has to men is clearly something he's never been able to act on the compound. But it's something that Nikki knows, and it's something that his mother knows. I only say gay because he does have that one wife that he's very close to, but theirs is very much feels like a friendship. And then there is the other wife he has who runs into that office, and she like is in tears, and she is completely distressed because she's never had a baby by him ever. And he will not have sex with her. She's completely like stressed herself to the hilt over it.
No, that's actually a really great point. I hadn't remembered that, but as soon as you said it, I'm like, that makes perfect sense. It's implied that Roman knows, and we know for a fact that Nikki and Adelaide know that he's attracted to men, and that Albie's like gay. But whereas Nikki, to her credit, just knows it, accepts it, and hasn't told anyone, not even her own husband. Adeline, when she feels that Roman's position might be usurped, tries to use this information to her own advantage and sets her own son up to be killed.
Right. Oh, God.
Like, Adeline, if Barb is Mother of the Year, Adeline is like the worst, like indisputably the worst mom on the show is Adeline.
But you know what? It makes sense to me only in that, and this comes back to what you were saying about how like Nikki and Adelaide are very similar people, and that like Nikki is like a ride or die, right? Mm-hmm. But so is like Nikki is ride or die for Bill and her family. Adelaide is also a ride or die for Roman.
Right. But the difference is that even when after Albie showed up to the house to threaten the family, even after Albie put snakes in Barb and Bill's bed, Nikki still kept his secret. Right?
True.
And then Adeline just like runs with this shit. Like, you know what? I know he's my own flesh and blood. I know I gave birth to this motherfucker, but fuck him. like I'm just going to throw him under the bus to save my husband. Like, Adelaide is so deep in the Roman Grant sauce, you guys. She drunk all the Kool-Aid.
Right. So another thing we'll see in season 2 is like, due to this sort of Weber gaming plot, I think we'll really start to see Bill change in terms of being more power hungry. He's more power hungry. He'll start to be slightly more controlling. He definitely changes from the Bill in season 1 to a more like, I want what I want when I want it, how I want it right now. And I think it's particularly visible in this sort of like episode where he takes Marge to this like meeting where they're sort of charming these Weber game people, and he in like a move that's really gross and like a power play, he outs himself as a polygamist, but it's in a way that's very like, I own these women, versus like, these are my wives that do things with me.
Right. So this all of this happens in season 2. So it's a lot, but you know, Margine doesn't see it as a power move that it is, because this is something she had literally begged Bill for. She's like, let me be your Nevada wife. You know, Barb got to be his wife in most of Utah. Nikki gets to be his wife at Wayne's school, but she never really got a place to be his wife. And she's really good at these negotiations because she's very charming. And right. She wanted to be the Nevada wife. She wanted to be claimed, but because he ran into a couple that he and Barb knows, he called Barb out to Nevada to save face. And so while Barb is deeply uncomfortable because she recognizes what's happening, Margine is just super excited to finally be claimed in public. Like, she just want to be chose, you guys.
Right. And I think she wants to be chose. And I think later on, when like in the episode, when she gets into bed with Barb, she's like, it's not as bad as like you think it is. Like, or she says something on the lines of like, it's not as bad as you think it is to be like an object or something. Or she says something along the lines of that. Or like, I don't care. I don't care being this sort of like symbol versus a person. And you do care. This makes you uncomfortable. So let me do this, because I'm fine with this.
I mean, I don't even think she was talking about herself as a person, but more Weber gambling. Like, she's like, I don't have the problem with gambling that you do, so let me do this. I don't even think that Margine fully realizes the ways that she is tokenized in that respect until season 3, actually, right?
Do you think so? Because when Anna first enters the picture, she does say like, I think there are flickers of it, because when Anna is first introduced, Margie does like ask Bill, like, do you just like me? Like, she's like, do you just like me because like I like to fuck a lot? Like, because I'm like the new, because she's like, because I'm the new one, because even newness eventually gets old. And Bill like lies. I mean, and Bill, like, I mean, he was lying to himself, but like, he's like, no, that's not the only reason. But like, it is the reason. Like, she's the hot one.
Right. She's young, she's pretty, and she has a very strong sex drive, even higher than Bill's. And I see this with all the wives, though. They have flickers and moments of clarity, or we see them gradually growing to like very solid conclusions, right? Barb has hers for most of season 1 and 2. Marge has hers between seasons 2 and 4. And I think Nikki has hers between seasons 3 and 5, where they start questioning the relationship and their role in his life. But, in the early stages of this, she was really just all in. Like, I really stand by this business. I really believe in it. I don't have a problem with gambling. Again, Marge was raised Catholic. They don't have some sort of like referendum on gambling. And she just wants a place to be public with him. She doesn't see, like, just like Barb gives him clout in the mainstream LDS community, Marge gives him a lot of clout with these business dealings with the Native Americans that he is in business with, and she legitimizes him in the same way that Barb does back home.
Right. No, that's right. That's right. Anyway.
And so all of these wives give Bill something really, really fundamental. And I just hate to see sometimes how he takes their contributions for granted.
He really does. No, I mean, that is, if there's the one consistent thing with Bill, like that's it, that he takes their contributions completely for granted.
Really quickly, I wanted to talk about Bill and Joey's mom, Lois, which is a character who, again, one of the many complicated characters.
Love Lois.
I love Lois. I love Lois so much. In fact, one of the times when Barb really pissed me off is like when Lois is yelling to Frank about something, which he deserved, and like Barb gets in the middle of it. And I'm like, this man was in your house, season 1. You see how badly he treats his children, how badly he treats his other wives. Like, why are you taking up for him? If there was a character that I could like label as long suffering, it would definitely be Lois, right? Like, she went from being the prophet's daughter to being a penniless nobody. Then she was married off to this man. She was Frank's second wife, who wooed her, but basically didn't want any woman who had a mind of her own. And the only reason his other wives get along with him so well is because they basically have the most submissive personalities, which she never has. Lois is a hustler. In season 2, she goes into business with her brother Eddie at a laundromat and is cleaning up. But of course, Frank shows up to fuck up her life yet again. She really loves her son and both of her sons. And she's someone who showcases a stiff upper lip. She doesn't talk about how much it hurt her when they were kicked off of the compound. But we see that it's something that still hurts her and that she has a lot of guilt about to this day. And it's part of the reason why she is so tender and patient with Joey's wife, Wanda.
Right.
Because I think she feels like she owes her son this.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And the relationship between Lois and her husband is a very interesting one because she loves him, but he's abusive, and you sort of see the way that she's had to learn to like fight him over the years. Mm-hmm. And it manifests. And then he's also like, he's like so good for nothing because he only even comes back around when he kind of hears a rumor that like she might have some money on hand. That's when he like pops back up into her life again. So it's
right. And they were legally married, right? Because in season 1, his first wife dies and she assumes a second wife. They can now be legally married. But because he loves to shit on her, he asked Nita, his third wife, to become his legal wife. And it's not that she wants to be Frank's legal wife so badly, but because she was passed over, this shames her in front of the rest of the community, right? And then he only ends up marrying her when Bill literally pays him to. all she wanted was to not be embarrassed in front of the community. It's not like she was like lusting after Frank like that. She really does love Frank, but she knows he's a piece of shit, and that's why she lives separately from him and the other wives. And we see when they were in Bill's house briefly how the other wives will like always take up for him, right? They always defend him no matter what fuckery he does. So like they're just as abusive in a way as Frank is, as far as Lois is concerned, because no one's ever on her side. And I can't imagine how isolating it must be to be in that environment and then have your children and your younger brother kicked off too. So you have no family and there's no one left. Like, I can't imagine what Lois went through.
Right. I mean, it sucks. It just like, ugh, yucks.
Lois needs some help. She's been through it. Like, all her life she had to fight.
Oh gosh. Anyway, so season two ends with in O Pioneers, episode 12, and the big thing that will sort of take us off is actually it's a pretty is that like Roman will show up to the house because I think he's now like on the run. Roman and Adelaide will show up to the house because he's on the run from the authorities, and that will take us into, and that's eventually what will take us into season 3, which will then see like the whole sort of crumbling of Roman and the fundamentalists, and so that's.
Oh, and I need to correct something I said earlier. Adelaide is not Roman's third wife; she's his 6th wife.
6. Okay,
so she really climbed the ladder, girl. She needs to teach these girls, do a master class. She really climbed that social ladder to be the favorite.
And there you have it, folks. This is everything that we think made the first 2 seasons of Big Love good, bad, and basic. If you'd like to rewatch or relive this series, Big Love is currently streaming on Hulu with the HBO add-on.
Big Love gave us a fictionalized version of fundamentalist LDL church and its practitioners, a deeply polarizing narrative for people on both sides of the story, and it turned it into network gold, crafting characters that were memorable and surprisingly relatable. Patrons, be sure to check out the GBB Big Love Spotify playlist, and join us next week when we'll be exploring seasons 3 through 5 of this unlikely hit.
Until then, our top-tier patrons can tune into our next music video retrospective, focusing on the late, the great Aaliyah. We'll be discussing Aaliyah's style, vision, cutting-edge direction, and the aesthetic that continues to be an inspiration. If you're not on this tier yet, level up. The episode goes live this Saturday.
Follow The Good, the Bad, the Basic on all major podcast platforms to listen to all of our regular weekly episodes on the go. If you love this sort of content and want more, become a show producer and patron on Patreon. You can find us at patreon.com/goodbadbasic. Your support allows us to keep bringing you our regular weekly episodes as well as exclusive bonus material.
Be sure to follow us at Good Bad Basic Pod on Twitter. And of course, follow our SoundCloud page, The Good, the Bad, the Basic, where all of our social media links are listed. Until next time. Bye everyone.